money buys a lot of things. Silence, impeccable marble floors, a private nurse who knows exactly when to look the other way. But $1 billion can't buy dignity when your spine is severed. Dominic had an empire and a fiancé who wished he was dead. Then came the cleaner. The electric hum of the wheelchair was the loudest sound in the penthouse. Dominic Cole used to dictate the pace of boardrooms with a single glance. Now, his daily existence was measured by the whir of battery-powered motors and the heavy theatrical sighs of the woman he was supposed to marry. Victoria stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, inspecting a freshly painted fingernail. She was bathed in the amber glow of the setting sun, looking every bit the pristine socialite. Dominic sat 10 feet away. He was staring at the back of her silk dress. "I'm just saying it's exhausting, Dom," Victoria said. She didn't turn around. "People stare. They don't look at me anymore. They look at the situation." The situation. That was her new favorite word for it. 6 months ago, black ice and a concrete barrier on a winding mountain road had stripped a 34-year-old tech billionaire of his mobility. His legs were dead weight. The doctors called it complete paraplegia. Victoria called it an inconvenience. "You don't have to go to the gallery opening tonight," Dominic said. His voice was gravelly, rusty from disuse. "And let your shareholders think I'm buckling under the pressure. Please." Victoria finally turned. Her smile was tight, practiced, utterly devoid of warmth. She walked over, the sharp click of her stilettos echoing off the hardwood. She reached down and adjusted the cashmere blanket over his lap. It was a purely aesthetic gesture. The blanket was already straight. She just needed a physical action to excuse the fact that she wasn't looking him in the eye. "I'll be back late," she told his left shoulder. "The regular night staff is off, but I called the agency. They sent a temp housekeeper. She can sit in the hall, just in case you need someone to fetch you water." She leaned in, her lips pressing briefly against his forehead. It felt like a customs agent stamping a passport. Cold, necessary, bureaucratic. Then she walked out. The heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind her, sealing Dominic in his high-rise glass cage. He sat there in the fading light. He tried to shift his weight. A dull ache had settled in his lower back. A phantom complaint from nerves that no longer reported to headquarters. He reached for the glass of water on the side table. His fingers, still weak from the secondary nerve damage of the crash, fumbled against the condensation. The heavy crystal glass tipped. It hit the hardwood floor and shattered. Water pooled, seeping quickly toward an antique Persian rug. Dominic closed his eyes. A hot, suffocating wave of humiliation climbed his throat. Before the accident, he would have grabbed a towel, wiped it up in 10 seconds, and forgotten about it. Now he was a hostage to a puddle. The sound of the break brought the temp housekeeper rushing into the room. Nora didn't look like the rest of the staff Victoria hired. Victoria liked her employees invisible, uniformed, and deferential to a fault. Nora wore faded denim jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and sneakers that had clearly seen better decades. Dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes. She carried the distinct, heavy posture of a woman who had been awake for 36 hours straight, and was calculating how many more hours she needed to survive to pay the gas bill. She stopped at the doorway, taking in the scene, the shattered glass, the spilled water, the paralyzed billionaire gripping the armrests of his chair so hard his knuckles were white. Dominic braced himself. He knew the script. She would gasp. she would apologize profusely as if it were her fault. She would look at his legs with that cloying, suffocating pity he had come to violently despise. Nora did none of those things. She sighed. It wasn't a sigh of burden. It was the sigh of a woman who just realized she had to walk all the way back to the kitchen for a mop. "Don't move," Nora said. Her voice was flat, practical. "Glass went everywhere. You'll get it in the tires." "I wasn't exactly planning on running a marathon," Dominic snapped. It was a cynical defense mechanism, a preemptive strike to keep her pity at bay. Nora paused. She looked at him. She really looked at him. Not at the custom titanium wheelchair. Not at the expensive suit pants covering useless legs. She looked right into his eyes. "Good to know," Nora said smoothly. "Saves me from having to tackle you. I charge extra for tackling." Dominic blinked. A short, abrupt sound escaped his chest. It took him a second to realize it was a laugh. Nora returned a minute later with a broom and a towel. She knelt beside his chair, sweeping the sharp shards into a dustpan. She moved efficiently, her focus entirely on the task. "I can call someone," Dominic muttered, suddenly intensely aware of the fact that this woman was on her hands and knees cleaning up his mess. "You don't have to do that. I'm a housekeeper." "Housekeeping is literally the job description," Nora replied without looking up. She tossed the glass into a small trash bin and threw the towel over the puddle, stepping on it with her worn sneaker to soak up the water. "Unless you want to sit here and stare at a wet rug for the next 4 hours. My fiancé usually has the staff handle this stuff when I'm elsewhere." "Your fiancé," Nora said, picking up the damp towel, "left you alone with a pitcher of ice water you can barely reach and a blanket that's going to overheat you in about 10 minutes. She stood up. She didn't ask for permission. She reached over and pulled the heavy cashmere blanket off his lap, folding it over the back of the sofa. The sudden rush of cool air was a profound relief. Dominic hadn't even realized he was sweating. "Better?" she asked. "Yes," Dominic said quietly. "Thank you. I'm Nora," she said. "Dominic." "I know. Your name is on the building." Nora walked toward the kitchen. "I'm making coffee. You want a fresh glass of water? A real glass, not a crystal vase that weighs 10 pounds. Please." She brought him a simple, lightweight plastic tumbler. It was easy to grip, easy to lift. It was the most functional, thoughtful thing anyone had handed him in 6 months. Dominic watched her walk over to the kitchen island, pulling out a textbook from her bag while her coffee brewed. She wasn't hovering. She wasn't treating him like a fragile antique. For the first time since the crash, Dominic felt like a human being occupying a room, rather than a patient occupying a bed. 3 days later, Nora was back. Victoria had extended her weekend trip to a spa in Aspen, citing caregiver burnout. She had fired the weekend nurse over a misplaced dry cleaning ticket before leaving, which meant the agency was scrambling. Nora had taken the weekend shifts. Double pay was double pay. But there was a catch. It was a Sunday, and childcare was non-existent. Dominic was sitting in his expansive, mahogany-paneled library. He was attempting to read a quarterly financial report, but his eyes kept drifting to the massive rainstorm battering the windows. The gloom outside matched the quiet, hollow feeling in his chest. He heard the elevator ding. The heavy front doors opened, followed by the sound of Nora's familiar footsteps. But there was another sound, too. A lighter, erratic patter. Dominic wheeled himself out of the library and down the wide corridor. Nora was in the foyer, aggressively stripping a bright yellow raincoat off a small, squirming boy. The kid was maybe 6 years old with a mop of unruly brown hair and eyes that were currently wide with awe as he stared at the vaulted ceiling. "Shoes off," Nora hissed, pulling a pair of muddy rubber boots from the boy's feet. "I mean it, Toby. You do not touch anything. You sit on the rug, you play with your cars, and you do not make a sound. Understand?" Toby nodded solemnly, clutching 3 scratched Hot Wheels cars to his chest. Nora stood up and froze as she saw Dominic rolling down the hall. A flash of genuine panic crossed her tired face. "Mr. Cole, I am so sorry," Nora said, stepping slightly in front of her son as if to shield him. "My sitter canceled at the last minute. I tried to get the agency to send someone else to cover your shift, but they couldn't. He's quiet. I'll keep him in the staff kitchen. You won't even know he's here." Dominic looked at the boy. Toby was peering out from behind his mother's leg. His eyes locked on Dominic. In Dominic's world, children were a foreign concept. Victoria hated them. His colleagues only brought them up as tax deductions or heirs to trusts. And since the accident, parents on the street actively pulled their children away from his wheelchair, treating him like a tragic exhibit they didn't want to explain. "It's fine," Dominic said. Nora blinked, clearly prepared for a fight. "Are you sure? Because I need this job, and I know the rules about bringing dependents." "I said it's fine, Nora." Dominic gestured to the massive, empty living room. "There's a 100-inch TV in there. Put him on the sofa. He doesn't have to hide in the kitchen." Nora's shoulders dropped. The relief was instantaneous and profound. "Thank you. Truly." An hour later, Nora was upstairs cleaning the master bathroom. Dominic was back in the library trying to focus on the numbers. He heard a soft squeak of rubber on hardwood. He lowered his tablet. Toby was standing in the doorway. He wasn't looking at the thousands of rare books. He was staring dead at the wheelchair. "Can I help you?" Dominic asked. He wasn't used to talking to kids. He sounded stiff, like a CEO addressing a junior intern. Toby walked right up to him. No hesitation, no fear. "Are your legs broken?" "Toby." Nora's voice cracked like a whip. She appeared in the hallway, clutching a dustcloth, her face pale with mortification. "We talked about this. You don't ask people questions like that. Apologize." "It's all right." Dominic raised a hand, stopping her. He looked back down at the boy. The kid wasn't pitying him. He was just trying to solve a puzzle. It was refreshing. "They aren't broken, but the cord inside my back that tells my legs how to move got cut." Toby frowned, processing the mechanics of this. "So they're just stuck?" "Yeah, just stuck." Toby nodded, satisfied with the data. He looked at the heavy titanium wheels. "Does the chair go fast?" "Fast enough." "Can I race it?" Toby held up a blue plastic toy car. Dominic stared at the cheap toy. Then he looked at Nora. She was holding her breath, waiting for him to snap, to throw them both out. He saw the tight grip she had on the dustcloth, the way her posture was braced for rejection. Dominic set his tablet on the desk. He engaged the joystick on his armrest. "I warn you, I have a superior motor." For the next 30 minutes, the sterile, silent penthouse was filled with the sound of a small boy giggling and the electric whine of Dominic's chair as he let Toby win drag races down the main corridor. Dominic felt a strange tightness in his chest. It wasn't pain. It was blood pumping. It was the feeling of being alive, of participating in the world instead of just watching it from behind glass. The front doors swung open without warning. The laughter died instantly. Victoria walked in. She was wearing a massive fur coat, dragging a designer suitcase behind her. She looked exhausted and incredibly irritable. She stopped dead in her tracks, taking in the scene. Dominic in his chair, slightly out of breath. A 6-year-old boy sitting on her $300,000 imported Italian rug. A blue plastic toy car resting against the leg of a Ming Vos. What in God's name is going on here? Victoria's voice was a knife cutting through the room. Nora hurried out from the dining room, wiping her hands on a rag. Ms. Vance, you weren't due back until tomorrow. Clearly, Victoria sneered, dropping her suitcase. She pointed a manicured finger at Toby. Whose child is that? Why is it on my floor? He's my son, Nora said. She stepped smoothly between Victoria and Toby, her maternal instinct flaring. My childcare fell through. I kept him out of the way. Out of the way? He's turning my home into a public playground. Victoria scoffed, stepping closer. She looked at Dominic, her face twisting with disgust. And you just let this happen? You let the help bring their dirty brats into our house while I'm gone? Good Lord, Dominic, are you completely helpless? Do I have to manage every single thing because you're confined to that chair? The words hung in the air. Toxic. Heavy. Dominic felt the familiar, crushing shame tried to pull him under. He looked down at his useless legs. He was helpless. She was right. Hey! Dominic looked up. Nora wasn't looking at Victoria. She was looking at him. Her eyes were fierce. Then she turned to Victoria. Nora didn't raise her voice. She didn't yell. She spoke with a terrifying, quiet authority. Do not speak to him like that, Nora said. Victoria laughed out loud, a harsh grating sound. Excuse me? Do you know who pays your agency, sweetheart? I don't care, Nora said. She stood her ground, her cheap sneakers planted firmly on the expensive rug. You can fire me, but you don't get to stand in his house and treat him like a piece of broken furniture. He is a man. He deserves respect. More respect than you clearly know how to give. Victoria turned crimson. Get out, both of you. Pack your trash and get out of my house. It's not your house, Victoria. The room went dead silent. Victoria slowly turned to look at Dominic. Dominic's hands were no longer gripping the armrests in shame. They were resting calmly on his lap. He sat up straighter. The rusty, gravelly quality of his voice was gone. He sounded exactly like the man who used to tear apart corporate raiders in boardrooms. The deed is in my name, Dominic said softly, his eyes locked onto his fiancé. Nora stays. The boy stays. You can take your suitcase and go back to Aspen. Victoria did not scream. She did not throw a tantrum. She was a woman of calculated assets, and she recognized a bad investment when she saw one. She looked at Dominic, her eyes narrowing into cold slits. Then she looked at the heavy titanium wheels of his chair. You will regret this, she said softly. You are half a man, Dominic. Nobody else will ever want to deal with this. She turned on her heel, her stilettos biting into the hardwood, and walked out. The heavy door slammed shut. The echo vibrated through the floorboards. Silence descended again. But it felt different. It wasn't the suffocating, heavy silence of the past 6 months. It was just empty space waiting to be filled. Dominic looked down at his useless legs. The phantom pain flared, a sharp sting. He looked up at Nora. She was standing by the dining table, her hand resting protectively on Toby's shoulder. She didn't offer a platitude. She didn't say good riddance or you're better off. She just nodded toward the kitchen. I'll finish the bathroom, she said, her voice steady. Then I'll heat up some soup. You missed lunch. Dominic felt a strange knot loosen in his chest. Thank you, he murmured. Over the next 3 weeks, the penthouse transformed. Dominic fired the expensive, condescending nursing staff. He offered Nora a full-time position as his household manager. The salary he proposed made her drop her coffee mug. She tried to refuse the amount, arguing it was charity. Dominic cut her off. I am paying for efficiency, loyalty, and the fact that you don't look at me with pity. Take the money. She took it, and with her came Toby. The boy became a fixture in the sterile, massive apartment. The pristine surfaces were soon cluttered with cheap plastic toys, scattered crayons, and the chaotic detritus of a young child's existence. Dominic found himself anticipating the noise. On a rainy Tuesday, Dominic sat in his library, staring at a complex merger proposal. His brain felt foggy. He rubbed his temples, frustrated. Toby wandered in, dragging a battered cardboard box. He dumped it on the floor. Hundreds of mismatched Lego bricks spilled onto the Persian rug. Building a spaceship, Toby announced, sitting cross-legged. Dominic watched him. His fingers twitched. He rolled his chair closer. Your structural integrity is going to fail on the port side, Dominic noted, pointing to a precarious stack of red blocks. Toby frowned. How do you fix it? You build a wider base, Dominic said. He reached down. His core muscles strained, but he managed to grab handfuls of long blue pieces. He handed them to the boy. Try these. They spent 2 hours constructing a massive, structurally sound plastic monstrosity. Nora found them there, covered in plastic bricks. She didn't coddle Dominic. She didn't praise him for being active. She just handed him a cup of black coffee and told Toby to pick up his mess before dinner. It was beautifully normal. Dominic started logging into his company servers again. He started reviewing the financials Victoria had insisted he was too fragile to handle. He found gaping holes in the quarterly reports. The interim CEO, heavily favored by Victoria, was bleeding the company dry. Dominic needed to return to the office. The glass doors of Coal Industries parted with a soft hiss. The reception area, usually buzzing with the frantic energy of a Monday morning, went dead silent. Dominic rolled through the lobby. He wore a sharp navy suit. His posture was rigid. Behind him walked Nora. She was not pushing his chair. Dominic insisted on moving himself, the heavy electric motors doing the work his legs could not. She carried a sleek leather briefcase and a dented thermos. She wore a simple black dress. She looked like an assistant, but her eyes scanned the room with a protective, calculating intensity. Whispers chased them down the long, mirrored corridor. Employees stopped in their tracks. Some stared openly. Others quickly looked at their phones, pretending not to notice the paralyzed billionaire who had not stepped foot in the building for 6 months. Dominic kept his eyes locked forward. The phantom ache in his lower spine flared, protesting the bumpy commute, but he ignored it. He reached the heavy oak doors of the main conference room. He did not hesitate. He engaged the joystick on his armrest and pushed the doors open. The board of directors completely froze in place. The room smelled of expensive coffee and dry erase markers. At the head of the long mahogany table sat the interim CEO, Harrison. Next to him, incredibly, sat Victoria. She held a small percentage of shares. a parting gift from their engagement. She was wearing a white silk blouse, looking perfectly at ease. Her smile faltered the second she saw the wheelchair. "Dominic," Harrison said. He recovered quickly, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "We were not expecting you today. The doctor said you needed rest." "The doctor said my spine is severed," Dominic quickly interrupted. His clear voice cut through the room like a serrated blade. He rolled his chair to the empty space at the opposite end of the table, locking the wheels into place with a sharp click. "They did not say my brain was dead. Though looking at this quarter yield reports, I assume yours is." A few board members shifted uncomfortably in their high-backed leather chairs. Victoria scoffed, crossing her arms. "Do not do this, Dom," Victoria said. Her tone was dripping with that familiar suffocating pity. "You are embarrassing yourself. You are not fit to run this company anymore. You really cannot even stand up to greet your shareholders." She smiled, a nasty, venomous thing that did not reach her eyes. "We were actually just voting on a permanent leadership transition." Dominic stared at her. He felt tired, but not defeated. He was simply exhausted by her predictability. He glanced over his left shoulder. Nora stood quietly by the wall, holding the briefcase. She met his gaze and gave a single firm nod. She stepped forward, unlatched the leather case, and pulled out a stack of thick-bound folders. She walked methodically around the table, placing one in front of every single board member. She completely ignored Victoria, stepping around the woman as if she were a piece of misplaced furniture. "What is this?" Harrison demanded, refusing to touch the folder. "That is a detailed forensic audit," Dominic said. He rested his elbows on the armrests of his chair, steepling his fingers. "It outlines exactly how you have been funneling company funds into private offshore accounts over the last 4 months. Accounts, I might add, that show frequent highly irregular transfers to a shell corporation owned by my former fiancé." The color drained from Victoria. The room erupted into chaotic, overlapping murmurs as the board members finally opened the folders. The evidence was irrefutable. Spreadsheets, wire transfer receipts, computer logs. It was all there in black and white. "This is completely fabricated," Harrison yelled, slamming his hand flat on the table. "You are a cripple. You have been sitting in a penthouse feeling sorry for yourself. You could not possibly have tracked this down." Dominic smiled. It was a cold, ruthless expression. "I have a lot of free time, Harrison, and I have a highly secure internet connection." He looked around the table, making eye contact with the remaining board members sitting there. "You have exactly 2 choices. You fire him immediately, strip Victoria of her shares due to corporate sabotage, and reinstate my operational control. Or I hand this audit over to the federal authorities in 5 minutes." Silence slammed back into the room. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of pure, unadulterated fear. They realized the predator was not dead. He was just operating from a seated position. Within 10 minutes, the vote was unanimous. Security escorted a shouting Harrison to the freight elevator. Victoria slowly stood up, both of her manicured hands shaking violently. She looked at Dominic directly. Her former arrogance was entirely replaced by panic. "Dom, please," Victoria whispered, her voice cracking. "We can talk about this. We were going to get married." Dominic did not blink. "Leave your security badge at the front desk, Victoria." She opened her mouth to argue, saw the absolute unyielding void in his eyes, and finally fled the room. The remaining board members quickly packed their things, eager to escape the immediate blast radius of his return. Soon, the massive conference room was completely empty. Dominic sat alone at the long table. The adrenaline was rapidly fading, leaving behind a deep aching exhaustion in his shoulders. The phantom pain in his legs was screaming now. He closed his eyes, taking a slow, ragged breath. He rubbed his temples. He heard the soft rustle of fabric. A plain white paper cup was placed very gently on the edge of the polished wood table. Dominic opened his eyes. Nora was standing beside him. She had poured coffee from the dented steel thermos. "Drink it," Nora said flatly. "You look gray." Dominic picked up the cup. The warmth seeped into his stiff fingers. He finally looked at her and smiled. If you loved this emotional story of resilience, respect, and finding true partnership in the darkest of times, please hit that like button right now. Share this video with your friends and family to spread the powerful message that real strength comes from within, not from your bank account. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more deeply human, grounded drama stories delivered straight to your feed. Drop a comment below with your favorite moment, and always stay tuned.